Welcome back to Theology for the Unwanted. I'm your host, Dan Tilson, and just a few feet away from me, I've got my trusty co-host, John Byram, making finger gun point. What?
Pew pew.
Yeah, what's going on, man?
Not much. How are you doing?
What's different about this episode?
We are in the nation's capital recording this one.
We sure are, because work is so intense this week that they put me up in a hotel rather than allow me to commute 20 minutes home through Thursday. How's your week been?
It's been chaotic neutral for all the D&D players out there. It's been a very interesting week. We're only 2 days into it as of this recording, and it's pretty good.
Okay. Well, before I packed up to go down the street to Washington, D.C., Chris and I were trying to plan our vacation for this year.
Oh.
Yeah, we know that fuel prices are crazy, so that might put a little stop on it. But he asked me if we could go to Greece. Says, always wanted to go to Greece, want to check out the islands, want to hop from one to the other.
Does he mean Greece, Ontario?
No.
Canada?
But you're getting closer to what I was thinking. Because in my mind, I understand that he wants to try something new. I keep taking him to Italy. But listen, I struggled through the Italian, and I mean struggle, learning Italian for way too many years to go on vacation to Greece. So I put a little bit of a fast one. I'm the international relations guy in the relationship. So I know that Sicily, the big island in the south of Italy, you know, like if Italy's a boot, this is the soccer ball that's being kicked.
It's very American of you.
Well, sorry, calcio, as they say.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it used to be a colony of Greece in the 8th century. And so 8th century BC.
Oh, wow.
And so there's actually a lot of Greek ruins. A lot of the city names are Greek in origin. So I presented this to him. I was like, hey, let's go stay at the King Dionysus Hotel. And he was like, oh, yeah, thinking this sounds very Greek. And I'm like, it's in the lovely Greek town of Naxos, Sicily.
I can imagine the disappointment on his face when he heard Sicily.
There was this weird pause. And then he looked at me and goes, but that means that you would have to do all the talking, right? And I was like, yep. He goes, deal.
Well, I mean, there you go. So, that's very easy.
Yeah. And that, in a nutshell, is what I've learned after 1 year of marriage.
Almost 1 year.
Almost 1 year.
You've got like 3 weeks to go.
That's right.
3-4 weeks.
So.
But who's counting, right?
So we are in our final Lenten episode. And all of Lent, John, you and I have been focusing on taking the mask off. Yeah, you're mimicking my video again.
No, I'm not. You can't prove that.
Okay. Well, as we talked about, Lent historically was about using sacrifices to poke off these hard skins that we built up around ourselves. If you think of like an orange and the peel, what's it called? The rind?
The rind.
Yeah. So the sacrifices historically have been thought of like poking and peeling and prodding that off to reveal the softer fruit beneath so that God's creation can shine. All of us wear masks, literally every single one of us, whether we are trying to hide from shame or we're trying to impress people by putting on a front. This is especially true for Catholics who are gay, Catholics who are divorced and remarried. So that is why we've placed such a heavy emphasis on this during our Lenten theology reflections for Theology for the Unwanted. So today, before I jump in, I thought I should note, and I didn't tell you I was going to do this, Pope Leo is like really getting down to business. So I don't know if you noticed, but Pope Leo has been advancing a lot of the reforms of Pope Francis, and he's doing it quietly. It probably feels a lot quieter than Pope Francis, right?
Yeah, you know, I would imagine for the first time ever in the history of the church and of the world, having an American Pope, we would have more Pope news here in America. And it kind of feels like we have less Pope news now that there's an American Pope. I feel like Francis was on the TV almost every night. And now it's like Leo's like just some guy from Chicago.
I mean, Pope Francis had the art of the airplane interview.
Yes.
Do you remember that? Like every controversial thing he said, it was at an altitude of like above 10,000 feet. So Pope Leo has been meeting a lot and thinking a lot about they're called new ecclesial movements. So if you think of a lot of the movements within the church founded since the early 1900s, they include lay people, so non-clergy. So if you think Opus Dei like has a little bit of a reputation for probably because of Dan Brown and all of his novels.
Just a smidge.
Yeah. What was that movie? Da Vinci Code?
I never saw it, but yeah, I guess so.
Okay. I remember the Arlington Diocese Catholic Herald. I hope I'm remembering this correctly, but they like warned us not to watch Da Vinci Code.
I don't think that was just an Arlington diocese things. I think a lot of Catholic dioceses did that. I mean, I remember a lot of, not to pick on just the Catholics alone, but a lot of Protestants also, Protestant major mainstream denominations even put out warnings against things like Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that was a thing.
Well, so a lot of the groups formed since the 1900s, like Opus Dei. If you think of Focolare, not quite as popular in the United States, but it does have a pretty big backing around the world. Even my own Sant'Egidio. So I don't know what it is about things founded over the last 100 years, but we're kind of having this Me Too movement come up. And not in terms of abuse necessarily, but I guess, I don't know what it is. Like you have a charismatic founder and a lot of people follow this founder. And then next thing you know, there's like a culture of we are the church.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Pope Leo spoke to Focolare the other day, and I alluded to this on our Instagram page. And I noticed that he was warning them that unity is not uniformity. And it's funny how the Pope can deliver something in a way like with a smile. So it sounds innocent. But you don't just like throw stuff like that out there without a reason behind it, you know?
I mean, it makes sense. If you take a look at sociology, the study of people in society as a group, when you take a look at, I know we're going to touch on this a little more later in the episode, but when you take a look at the ideology of the mob mentality, right? So when you have a mob or a large group of people with the same thought, you have unity.
Yeah.
You have unity in that group. Now the question is does that small group represent the larger population? And most of the time the answer is no. That's where we get the term vocal minority.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the Pope's spot on.
Well, he said, this is where it really occurred to me that there was a problem he was trying to address. He goes, this new phase you're entering requires a strong commitment to transparency from those in positions of responsibility at all levels. In fact, transparency is both a prerequisite for being believable and a requirement. And then he says unity should not be understood as like a uniformity of thought. That's like, in my mind, for a pope to say something so clearly, because normally things are like veiled under layers. He's telling this particular community, stop giving marching orders to people. That is not how Christ works. So I posted that on Instagram and I immediately got some messages.
Yeah.
Somebody then sent me a decree signed by the Vatican silently in December. And it was to another community, just like Focolare, called New Horizons. They actually have a pretty big presence in Italy and some seminaries. And it was the exact same thing. It was like, you guys have been too militant and, your stuff is starting to stink and you're not even aware of it. Then here's where it caught the attention of the American news. Pope Leo sat down for a meeting with this author named Gareth Gore. He wrote a book called, let's find this, Opus, The Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking, and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside the Catholic Church.
Oh my.
Yeah.
That's intense.
So when the Pope does a one-on-one meeting with somebody who wrote that kind of material, you're like, there's a pattern here, especially when you take into consideration the other speeches and actions he's taken recently.
Now, I mean, something else that I take into account, obviously, having spent some time in Chicago. Chicago was a hotbed for mob activity. Who knows? He may have like a little, I got to lay down the law here a little bit to some of these peoples and get them back in line kind of thing.
There was a book written a few years ago. It was like the smut of Catholic writing.
Oh my.
And
was it the 50 Shades of
the Vatican?
Of the Vatican? Like,
I think it was called The Secret Papers of Pope Benedict. Anyway, It was a guy who was writing on kind of like the hidden LGBT culture in the Vatican, which is not so hidden, by the way. Like, this is just kind of common knowledge that a lot of our priests are gay, and like, why fret about that? But there was one section of the book I remember where he's talking about this Vatican museum employee who, like, strongly suggesting the dude has mob connections.
Oh no.
And suddenly, like, money goes missing from the Vatican Museum. But even after it's uncovered, he's still employed. Why? I too am afraid. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that and Amoris Laetitia, the document that Pope Francis wrote on marriage, it's coming up on its 10-year anniversary. And he is calling all of the heads of the Catholic bishops from around the world to come meet with him. He said, we're in an era of rapid change as far as what the understanding of the family goes. And he wants to listen to their ideas on Amoris Laetitia. So when Pope Francis wrote this document in 2016, super controversial because it opened the door for divorced and remarried people to have communion. Shocker.
Lay gasp.
They gasp. So for this episode, we're bringing in theologian Father Martin Lintner. He's a little bit controversial. His expertise is in the area of romance. A little weird to have someone who's a friar also be an expert in romance.
Sounds like we have a spin-off of a popular TV show. We're just going to call it Heated Religion.
Oh, trademark.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not if we submit it first.
Father Martin Lintner is pretty cool because he wrote a 600-page book on marriage. And if you think about it, if you ever ask somebody to sum up what is marriage, it's probably not going to take them more than like 2 minutes of talking.
Yeah.
But this guy wrote a 600-page book. So he has a lot of important ideas. But he also pointed out that romance is something that's only existed in the concept of theology for about 150 years. He said the early church, not a freaking clue, not any idea of what romance was. You got married because you had legal obligations. You didn't get married for love. And so the idea that the modern man can love your spouse before you get married to them, it's super new. And so church doctrine is still not quite sure how to deal with that.
Makes you wonder what all those friars and monks in their dimly lit cells were writing about all the way, hundreds of years ago with the little candle in the corner.
Monks and cells.
Monks and
We've talked
cells.
about this a lot. Yeah, the rules of the church are written by monks in cells. And now the monks live outside of the cells and they're trying to figure out what to do with this.
They didn't want to go back in the cells.
I know. Okay, so we're going to look at two biblical passages here. One is the raising of Lazarus from the dead, and that was the gospel last Sunday. And then we're going to look at something that may be a little bit more familiar to most people, that time when Jesus asks Peter, do you love me 3 times? Okay, so before we do that, we did get a lot of comments last week on the episode, which touched on focus missionaries, the Catholic missionaries on college campuses. I think we gave a pretty honest perspective. It was a lot of good and some things that we had concerns about. But there was something else that came up in the comments and wanted to address this today. So there's a focus missionary Bible study that starts off by asking people to read from St. Paul in Ephesians chapter 5. John, have you ever heard of this verse before?
I was in Ephesians 5, 22 through 24.
I think so.
So I'm very aware of it. In fact, it reared its head at one of my friends' weddings. It was a passage they decided to read during the ceremony.
This was a wedding
Yes.
ceremony?
Yes.
This is not a passage that you read to people during a wedding ceremony.
Would you believe me if I told you the groom had the bride's mother read this passage?
Oh, dude, you don't do that.
Well, it happened, and the audible gasp was great. It should have been a reality TV show.
Clickbait. What does St. Paul say?
Pretty much talking about doesn't dive in depth to it, but essentially talks about how the woman in a relationship needs to be submissive to her husband.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm thinking back to our college campus, Catholic campus ministry, and this was something that came up a number of times, and people always had these like canned responses ready for it.
Yes.
One of them was, submission is sub-mission, like under the mission, dude. And Absolutely not, because I did look that up just to be sure, and it turns out that the root words in Latin do not actually connect there. So that we can be sure it was not that. Okay, good news. I pulled up one of the old Bible study guides that I had from college. And here, let me pass this to you.
Okay.
Go, how did they try to explain this away?
There's a lot here. I would probably narrow it down to the biggest takeaway here is they say the intention of this series of questions is to bring about a new understanding of submission in which men and women submit to each other out of the reverence for Christ, laying their lives down so that they can uphold each other's dignity. It dives really in deep into this passage because obviously it can be easily misconstrued. But I think that's the biggest takeaway is they're trying to switch the submission from the idea of the woman being submissive to the man to the man and woman in the relationship being submissive to each other for the reverence of Christ.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound so bad,
It
right?
doesn't sound as bad when you frame it that way.
This is really weird to me because instead of just saying, hey, listen, St. Paul like really valued a hierarchical culture at that time. And he did believe in this rank order. It was like
Yeah.
man, and then under man was woman, right? He did believe that.
It's very Paul and Saul of him.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not super controversial. So I don't know why we're so afraid of it, because I think a lot of theologians have pointed out that what Paul was saying in towards of like rank order / legal submission, that's cultural.
Yeah.
That's not theological. And I don't know why we feel so compelled to kind of keep that alive. Like, oh no. We still believe this, just not what Paul said.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, it's you're changing perspective. And I think Focus is trying to do it in a delicate way here by having equal submission in the idea of so like when you have a marriage, the marriage involves three bodies: the man, the woman, and Christ and God.
Right.
Right. So you have that there as well. So the idea of a relationship is you give yourself fully to your partner, you give yourself fully to God, the partner, same thing, right? So you're giving yourself to each other, and it's a relationship that glorifies God. So I think they're trying to portray it in that same way. But the issue is that we still have a lot of people who are not seeing it that way, and they're interpreting it as the really old interpretation of that hierarchy of having the woman actually be submissive in the relationship to the man. And we're starting to see a resurgence of that too.
Oh, you told me about a Netflix documentary on this.
Yes. Yeah. So on Netflix, there is a documentary that dives into what is dubbed the manosphere. So there's a lot of really big influencers out on the internet, on social media that have gained a lot of attraction and a lot of followers from young adult males and male teenagers. We're talking young Gen Z, Gen Alpha age range. And one of their big messages is the really old school Paul-esque version of this passage being the woman should be submissive to the man in the relationship. And that's kind of been pushed probably well over the past couple of years. And we're starting to see an upsurgence of younger males with this attitude coming back to church, which is great. Coming back to church is always great. But they're coming back with this idea that the religion justifies women being submissive to them. And that's just not the case.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you feel like you have to follow every cultural example in the Bible, then that presents a problem. But Catholics generally don't suffer from that.
Yeah.
However, we do in the United States a little bit. I think that might be because we do have a strong Protestant tradition in the US, and Protestants, for better and for worse, have really moved Catholic culture here in a certain way.
Yes.
I say for better and for worse. It's not black and white. But yeah, no, St. Paul very clearly, like super clearly, believed in that legal, man on top and then rank order below that, women. St. Thomas Aquinas carried that into the scholastic age too a little bit. But that was because he believed that like women were just not fully formed men. Hey, listen, for the science of the time, that was the best they had. The good news is the Catholic Church doesn't say, hey, you have to take the science of the 12th century and run with it. No, we have soap now. Okay, so bringing back Father Martin Lintner, the friar who's an expert in romance, he says, listen, guys, the morality of prohibition, so basically the morality of rules, it hasn't helped us mature personally. It hasn't helped us mature effectively in the way that we relate to others. And it hasn't helped us mature sexually. So a lot of his work has to deal with what does the church do in a culture that not only allows women to be equal, but a culture that allows all people, men and women, to vote. Because you have to remember, democracy, super modern concept. And what does it mean to be in a church where people can have voices and have that kind of autonomy?
I think that's going to be a continuing struggle for the church also because with society empowering women more every day going forward, on that march for full equality, the church finds itself in a unique position because only males can be priests, right? So if the idea of equality that the church is pushing for outside of the church for women can't be upheld inside the church, it feels like it's a delicate balancing on that rope. Now, again, I'm not advocating for women priests, but it's just easy for, I would imagine, a woman being in a parish listening to a message like this about equality in a marriage, equal submission to each other and to God, preaching equality, but then inside of the church, you have, oh, women can only be administrators in a parish or join religious life. They can't be a priest or be elected to the papacy or anything like that. So I just find it, I would think that it's just a very fine line the church would have to walk.
Yeah, I think it was actually John Paul II. So if you think about it, not super long ago,
Yeah.
maybe 1976, actually attempted to clarify that because a lot of the what we would now call junk science from the days of Aquinas, it was excellent knowledge back then. It was considered the best knowledge to know that a woman is just a man who didn't form fully, you know, and, and those ideas were never totally rejected. They were also never totally held within church doctrine, but they were never totally rejected until roughly the 1970s, long, long, long after people had already set down these ideas.
Yeah.
And JP2 did his best to say, hey, we still can't have women priests. Yes, I am aware that the traditional reason why is no longer applicable. So he's switched things over to a more spousal meaning, and we start getting more and more into, men and women are complementary to one another. They complete one another. So yeah, the church has been developing quite rapidly on these issues. And I don't know, we'll see where Pope Leo takes this over the next year when he meets with all of the bishops. So let's jump into this past Sunday's gospel. It's Lazarus. So if you look at John chapter 11, there's one part that we really want to focus on. And John, I'll pass this passage over to you. Go ahead and read it.
Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. So Jesus said to them, untie him and let them go.
So this section here, we're going to focus on the Lazarus come out, because obviously for a lot of our listeners, the closet, for a number of reasons, like really resonates.
Mhm.
And then we're also going to focus on the untie, which is often translated as unbind. Unbind and let him go. I don't know. Let's paint the picture here. Like if you're thinking about this gospel and you're trying to imagine it in your mind, as someone who's a germaphobe, I am absolutely terrified of this because it says right here, he's standing up when he comes out, right? His face was wrapped in a cloth. If you're standing up and there's a cloth loosely wrapped on you, but somehow it's sticking to your face, what does that suggest?
There's some sort of substance holding it in place.
Yeah, this dude was oozing decay.
And they didn't have Lysol wipes or anything.
No, they didn't. No. And guys, here's the thing, and I don't mean any disrespect to Lysol and Clorox, but frickin' read the bottles because it tells you right on there it doesn't kill norovirus. Okay? And that's the stomach flu.
That's why it says it's 99.9%.
Okay, well the point one
is the norovirus.
Yeah. Not in my world. Okay, so look, we have this man that Jesus wept for, right? And I don't know, help me paint this picture too, because we have this image of a God who's like really neat and tidy, and he's losing himself over this man.
Which is honestly, it's weird, right? When you take a look at all the other religions and how their deities are painted and how their deities are represented, there's not very many human characteristics to them. They're these either very macho or very strong feminine type deities that may take on the image of a human. Their avatar, for lack of better terms, is very humanoid, but they're still portrayed as a deity that has everything figured out, no emotion, something humanity could never understand. They're just type A God status and they don't deviate from anything, right? But here we have the idea of God who has already humbled himself by becoming man and now showing human emotion, which, just thinking back real quick, I can't think of any other time any deity showed any kind of emotion like that.
Yeah, this would be a fun experiment, but if you asked like ChatGPT or Gemini to describe this perfect fake God, at no point does it say he wept and just like lost himself. But that's what happened here. And I think it's important to know that when you are bound up and whatever it is that kind of keeps you stuck in life, when you are bound up, Christ is capable and even loses himself. I mean, he didn't say, "Let me get my dogmatic textbook and find the right response." He didn't grab the catechism, obviously, because he was nearly 1,970 years early for that. And he didn't grab canon law, right? He didn't grab these tools. What did he do? He fell apart. It doesn't even say that he stopped to pray, to say, like, Lord, Jesus does in fact cry out to the Father in the Gospels. We don't even see that here. Jesus loses himself over his friend.
And I think that's the beauty of Jesus, right? So how are we as humans ever able to comprehend the glory of God? We're told that we can't, that we can only understand it based upon what our brains can handle. But if you are in this moment, if you're a follower of Christ and you're with him there in this moment, and you truly believe that Jesus is God, and then you see this human response to emotion, that is such a powerful connection for his followers to be like, look, I'm never going to be able to fully understand the glory of God, but in this moment, I have this other connection with someone I view as God. That is so strong from a leader perspective for helping his followers become more in tune and more committed to Jesus's teaching and the start of Christianity. But also we see moments like this with charismatic leaders who are able to have that human connection with their followers to really grow their parishes, or flip it over to the Protestants, to grow their churches into mega churches. It's being charismatic and being able to show those emotions. And that's what we're seeing here is Jesus having a human reaction, and it's causing his followers to have a strong emotional reaction in the positive.
So you mentioned connection in a few different ways there. And for a number of reasons, we're going to advise that people don't get stuck in the Greek. But I did
Yes.
pull out especially if you don't want to go on vacation there.
Okay, if you don't want to go on vacation, absolutely.
But I pulled out the Greek concordance for this phrase, Lazarus, come out, because coming out of the closet has very strong meaning to our listeners. And this phrase is used a handful of other times in the Gospels, specifically whenever Jesus wants to elicit a reaction from somebody. And so by crying out, Jesus is already like trying to get that relationship going again, right? There's been a rupture and he's trying to restore the relationship. He clearly expects Lazarus to come out. I mean, of course, he's performing the meal, but he like expects a reaction from him. And what is that restoration for? We talk about the command to unbind him from the cloths. I think a lot of the early church fathers focus so much on guilt, guilt and sin. And to me, like that's a legal thing.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit earlier about how St. Paul focuses on this military type rank, right? Well, in the same way, guilt, someone's at fault, someone needs to pay restitution, whatever. I think we can also look at this from a slightly more modern lens in the sense that we have new tools, right? We now know what it is to be romantic, completely unknown at the time of this gospel. So, what else do we know about? Shame. Shame was a concept back then, but shame was not understood in the same psychological terms that we understand today. And to me, I think shame is more relational. It speaks to connection. So, if Jesus is trying to unbind him, I think it's fair to look at what kind of shame does Lazarus wrapped up. I mean, the guy is oozing stuff, right? What what shame does he hold that we can also find in our own lives?
Yeah, I mean, Lazarus, the story of Lazarus is he was rejected from his community because of his disease, right? So he was an outcast. He was cast away from the rest of his community. When you take a look at shame, when you take a look at our listeners, especially our LGBT listeners, when it comes to the idea of shame, it goes back to that stigma of where society is, right? And I touched on a little bit back in the opening about mob mentality, the sociology theory behind this, where you know if you identify one way and then there's one other person who says, well, I don't agree with you. When it's 1v1, you may not feel that shame, right? Yeah, if they may say something that's derogatory or slanderous that, may be a little hurtful, but at the end of the day, it's 1v1. You don't necessarily feel like an outcast in that situation. You don't feel that shame. But let's say you're going to let's say you're going to a pride festival, right? To just kind of give a bigger picture, right? You're on your way to the pride festival. You're not there yet, but you're on your way there, and like, let's say you're 8 blocks away, and then there's this group with these signs with hateful terminology, and there's like 50 people there, and they're chanting, they're yelling, they're screaming, they're pointing fingers at you, and you're the only person there. The mob mentality states that one person isn't going to be as vocal or as violent with their words or actions in some cases as they would be with other like-minded people around them. So if there's 20, 30, 40, 50, the larger the group, the more vocal and out of hand they can get. And the more that the person on the opposite side of that group would feel that shame. Now, granted, once you got to the Pride Festival, once you got to the parade, right, that protest group won't be there. And if they are, they're going to be severely outnumbered. So that mob mentality actually switches roles in that sense. So the shame here would be for our listeners is being in an area that may not be as welcoming and accepting of who they are as a child of God because of their sexuality.
Friar Father Martin Lintner, as he's talking about what the church needs to take into consideration as it starts to flirt, see what I did there, with the
Flirts.
idea that romance belongs in theology,
Mhm.
right? Again, it's fairly new and the church's timescale, and the church is still not sure how to integrate romance into theology. So he says, beyond rules, it's about promoting the capacity for relationship and the capacity to love. So we can see that here with Jesus crying out to Lazarus and then telling people to unbind him. It's about undoing whatever is preventing the relationship from happening. So the church, Father Martin Lintner says, is called to promote the capacity for relationship and the capacity to love. We must have this capacity to differentiate people who are different than us without devaluing or negatively judging other forms of life morally. And by the way, I think this applies not only to LGBT, but obviously there's an increasing number of divorced people who
Yeah.
are either already Catholic or desire to be become a Catholic or just more engaged in their parish. Now, historically, we've just kind of said if your marriage it's not legally valid, then sorry, you can't have communion. The church is slowly trying to figure out if there are better ways because you got to remember when you're offering someone the Eucharist, you're offering Jesus Christ himself. So, how silly is it to think that if someone is, in your mind, a deep, deep sinner, don't you think you'd want to put them at the front of the line?
I mean, it goes back to the idea that what is who is supposed to be in church? The person who has it all together, the person who is doing everything they're supposed to be doing, or is it the person who is struggling in life, who is down in the dumps, who may be struggling to follow their religious conviction, who may be dealing with a sin or a vice, or may be considered an outcast by the community they want to be a part of? The argument that the church is a hospital for the sick or for those who aren't strong in their faith makes complete valid sense. The church is there for people who need the help and assistance, not for the people who have it all together. Now, again, holiness of obligation, you have things you have to do as a Catholic. I understand that. But theoretically speaking, you're right. It's not the person who has it all together that needs to be the first person in line. It's the person who desperately needs Jesus is the one who needs to be back in line.
So, another good friend of the show, Professor Andrea Grillo, he kind of talks. It's so funny because in the United States, he's widely considered super liberal, and he probably is on some issues, but he doesn't like divorce. He always like surprises you with the issues that he's like very conservative on. Because he's like, the gays, they're cool. Divorce, oh, I don't know.
Divorce is, I don't know about that one.
Good. Nailed it on the accent, man.
Oh, thank you. Guys.
Yeah. But it quickly becoming a tagline in the show. So he says the pastoral attitude of the church, it's not about dissolving what's valid, because if you're married once in the church, you're married sacramentally and it's valid, he goes, we can't take that away, right? But pastorally, we do have to help people mourn. Jesus mourned over like the loss of his friend had Jesus spinning. Jesus didn't reach for the rule book to say, like, what do I do now? Jesus was just lost and totally unable to be consoled. And so with divorced people, Andrea Grillo says, we do as a church need to acknowledge that what once existed is no longer there.
I think that's beautiful because that can work not only for relationships, for marriage, but that can work for friendships and so many other instances of loss. One that comes to mind, which is very bad too. Like, there's a grieving process when a family loses a child. Like, let's say there is a miscarriage.
Yeah.
There's a grieving process. We even have a medical term for it. There's grief that happens with the loss of any kind of relationship. I can remember growing up in Korea at a time where social media wasn't super prevalent yet. So not everyone was on Facebook, not everybody was on Twitter, not everyone was on Instagram. Like, not everyone was online yet. So when you move back stateside, for a fact that relationship is going to end.
Yeah.
And you never know if you're going to rediscover that person back stateside or not. So there's a rawness to that. And I think in this passage with Jesus's emotion, I think we have a very easy time connecting to that raw emotion because it's so relatable. It's so relatable. Jesus and Lazarus were best friends. They were really good friends. That was that human emotion coming out. And I feel like that's something that we all can unfortunately relate to is the grief of loss.
Okay, speaking of people whom we love.
Yes.
Okay. We promised that Gospel of John passage that honestly had me spinning this week. I have never called so many people asking for advice before. I even reached out to a Southern Baptist professor.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, just help me understand what the heck happened here.
You've got contacts in all denominations. That's impressive.
Well, one thing I do not understand, as we've stated many times in this episode and in many ways, is I do not understand Greek.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why you're
So
going to Sicily.
that's do you remember, again, thinking back to college and kind of the formation we were having in our faith there, anyone ever talking about the different words for love in Greek?
The one that comes to mind is agape.
Yeah, for sure.
Agape.
That was the one that you are supposed to like.
Yes.
Do you remember the Greek kind of love that you're supposed to hate, or you're told you're supposed to hate?
I don't remember.
Eros.
Eros, that one.
Yeah, it's the sexy stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we were taught to be kind of like shamed, to be bound by it.
There's a Versace men's fragrance called Eros.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Huh. Guess it's meant for first dates and not for a family member.
Well, if you ask people in the fragrance scene, they'll tell you that's what every boy wears to their first club.
Gross. Okay, so bringing it back to the different kinds of love. By the way, I feel like I learned this at the same time that all of the girls around me were like, oh, what's your love language?
Love language.
Yeah, and I'm not talking like the Greek words, but it's like what? Acts of service and quality time. And I don't remember what the others are.
Mine's food.
I was going to ask you what your love language is, but you just ruined it for me.
No, I actually know what my love language is.
What is it?
It's quality time.
Quality time? Not touch?
No, just quality time.
Okay, all right.
Like just being in the presence of whom I'm dating.
Okay. Mine's quality time too, but increasingly I've been more about providing acts of service, like doing the dishes, cleaning things a little bit extra.
I just do that because that's the Franciscan in me.
Yeah.
I just do it because to me, that's just part 2 of my love language. But yes, that's just something that I enjoy doing.
People want to know, what is a gay committed relationship like? And let me tell you, there is no better truth I can give you than doing the dishes every night. That is what love is when you get to my stage.
I can totally see Chris just saying thank you as he like scoots by the kitchen.
Oh, he does. Okay, so I told you the passage that we're going to look at in John chapter 21. Can you sum up for me the way that you understand it when you read it or hear it? What happens?
So originally when I read this, my understanding of this was essentially Jesus testing Peter after Peter denied him 3 times. He's now asking him 3 times to prove his love and loyalty to Jesus by asking him 3 times, do you love me? In a sense, kind of erasing Peter denying him 3 times, but yeah.
No, that is exactly how Sister Mary Christine in 6th grade told me. That's what I was told in high school. That's what I remember from homilies.
Convert points here.
Okay, so atheist scholar Bart Ehrman, who's a professor, I believe, at UNC.
So we're doing Southern Baptist and atheist.
I was desperate this week, man. So the whole idea for this segment here came from his latest podcast episode on misquoting Jesus. And he points out, again, we've got these different kinds of love. The highest, like love for the sake of God, that's what we call agape. And you're probably most familiar with that if your preacher or priest has ever told you about the different types of love. Okay. Then you have philia, like Philadelphia, the brotherly love. Okay. That's definitely a step down, right?
I think you called it friend zone.
Friend zone, yeah.
Yes.
But it's not negative, right?
Yeah.
Like when you look at the church fathers, when they're writing about philia, it is not a slight.
Yeah.
It's totally acceptable. And then of course there's eros, but eros, fun fact. Let me just say that the word eros, which is the one that everyone's been told to be ashamed of, that word ain't mentioned even once in the New Testament.
Huh.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. Okay. For all of the fear that we have been told to have, it's not even thought of.
Maybe it was removed over time.
Yeah. Monks and cells.
There you go.
So here is, and I verified this like a number of times with a lot of different scholars since listening to this on Bart Ehrman's podcast. Here's how the passage actually goes. Jesus says to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you agape me? Peter replies, yes, Lord, you know that I philia you. Dude, that's like being friend zoned right there.
Yeah.
Okay. And Jesus, I don't know exactly what his reaction is, but he says, okay, feed my lambs. Okay. It continues. Here comes the second one. Jesus trying again, sounding a little desperate, right? He says to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you agape me? Peter goes, yes, Lord, you know that I philia you. And Jesus goes, okay, tend my sheep. Third time's a charm, right? No, Jesus changes the bar here. He goes, Simon, son of John, do you philia me? And Peter was distressed that Jesus had asked him a third time, do you love me? And so he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I philia you. Dude, I am so disappointed knowing that that's what it says.
So in my mind, how it played out is like, like when you're watching a comedy and you're trying to get someone to say something and they keep saying the opposite, then you say the opposite in hopes of them saying the opposite of what they were saying. That's how it played out in my head.
Jesus was like, nailed it. No, I like my first reaction when I found out that that is actually as it is written. I was so disappointed in Peter, honestly. Like, oh, he can't get to that level of love of God, right? Eh, But remembering everything that I've heard in church growing up, I did go back to the early church fathers to see what did they write about this. And it seems like nobody was concerned. There's actually like a shocking lack of concern for this. So, as I mentioned, among the people that I reached out to, the theologians, one was a professor, a Southern Baptist professor in Georgia. And he said the most shocking words of all time to me. To me, he goes, Daniel, love is love.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Wait,
And I was
I'm sorry. A Southern Baptist minister said that?
the funny thing is, I don't think he meant it the way that you and I heard it.
Okay.
I
Wait a minute.
I'm pretty darn confident that he is not supportive of my relationship, but we still got that professional relationship,
Gotcha.
Hey, and he said to me, love is love. And dude, this is the point where I start spinning. I'm just not able to calculate like the early church fathers, the theologians from all of time are fully aware that it appears Peter is friend zoning Jesus and they are not concerned because love is love.
But at the same time, again, now my 21st century brain thinking about this is that if I was a charismatic leader, let's say, right? And I'm trying to get people to follow me, and I'm doing everything in my power to show them I am worthy of them following me. And they're like, you know what? I'll follow you on weekends, right? Having that kind of quasi commitment to it. As that, leader, I'd be taken aback a little bit. I was like, well, wait a minute. Like, this is not the goal.
Do you think Peter was like, look, Jesus, they just killed you and you escaped this time?
But that's the thing though. If Peter was witness to all of this, he was there for Lazarus. He's there for the resurrection. He's here receiving the gift of tongues, right? To go out to spread the news. And Peter's still like, you're like my best friend, but I can't love you on that higher level.
Yeah, so I was researching this more, and it turns out that my disappointment, it's actually a very modern thing. In fact, I've come to the conclusion that maybe we're over investigating people's motives for love.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
So are you telling me love is blind?
Oh,
Or maybe age is just a number?
I'm so glad you didn't say heated rivalry.
No, no. The Heated Rivalry was not a dating reality TV show on Netflix.
So I don't know. And it's hard to like figure out what do we as Catholics who maybe feel unwanted, like what do we take away from this? Pope Benedict did write that even though this probably wasn't a big deal, and it's also possible this was just like the author's style. By the way, the author's style is super weird if that's true. If you're like friend zoning God. But
it's such a modern term to use too.
Hey,
friend zoning God.
Apparently my disappointment in Peter, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed.
That's the worst line you could have.
Is a modern phrase.
It hurts.
So yeah, well, great. I found a new way to hurt you.
No, stop it.
Okay, well, I don't totally know. Like, what do we take from this as Catholics who feel unwanted? But Pope Benedict did say, listen, Jesus if this was his intent, was to get Peter to commit to a kind of love, he came down to his level. And Jesus was apparently very comfortable with this. And so if you ever feel like, I'm not like those perfect Catholics in the front row at Mass who are singing every hymn, and I just don't know if I'll ever get to their level. Turns out God, who weeps for us when we are bound up by shame, God who dies for us and resurrects and still asks you if you love him, like, hey, you still on my team, guys? We're recruiting. It turns out that Jesus is really comfortable with that. And so I think as we start to close out Lent, as we take our masks off, the mask of shame, the mask of trying to perform to appear like a better Catholic, Jesus just wants you to be you. And if you is like not the A+, I'm here to love God every single day, Jesus is going to challenge you, but he is perfectly happy to exist alongside you, to walk with you. And apparently there's no judgment. So again, I'm glad we brought in Friar Father Martin Lintner and his thoughts on romance and the church, because family life is increasingly difficult. You're not the only one. And if your parish has made you to feel like you're the only one, that is stupid. So Father Martin Lintner says, the more we know another person, the more we take responsibility for them. That's why John and I always say, share your stories. Always. Because if you share your stories, your church will know how to take more responsibility for you. Not to wrap you up and bind you, but to love you.
And I think you'd be surprised to know how many people may not actually know what you're going through or what the church is doing and how it's affecting you unless you speak up. That's something I've always said since episode 1 and since even before this podcast came about, is definitely talk to your priest, ask questions, make sure people know, and talk. Whether it's sharing with us here or in your church, in your parish community, always share your story.
We really appreciate you listening. It means a lot to hear your story. So if you're not ready to share with your parish, you can reach out to me and John at theologyfortheunwanted.com, at theounwanted on Instagram and on TikTok.
There you go.
Linking out for a second. But we're so grateful for you. And one more time, share your stories. We'll talk to you soon.